This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Any questions, guys? Any questions for me? So we are looking at a couple of things like what are the merging strategies out there, like squash merge, let's say fast forward, rebase with fast forward, merge no fast forward, and all these things out. So any questions there, guys? Anyone? Any questions that I can answer before I move forward with this lecture?
Good morning, sir.
Go ahead, Akshay. Good morning.
Sir, when we create a self-hosting machine,
Mm-hmm.
do we get a list of software to be installed on the agent machine, sir? Like before that.
Right, we do, but that's our responsibility. I did respond back to the email just a couple of, let's say, minutes ago. So yes, just to answer, we do. It's our responsibility, and the list of software completely depends upon the project that you are working in. For example, let's say you're doing a lot of .NET, okay? So maybe the
Okay.
list of software should be something like .NET Core, ASP.NET Full Framework, PowerShell, and also something like 7-Zip and generic softwares out here like Google Chrome and all these things out that are required by the application and all these things out. Let's say you're working for Python software, let's change it slightly a little bit like PyCharm and all these things, something that you need to install. Again, what do we do is like, when we are starting a new project, even we ourselves do not really understand or do not really know what kind of dependencies that the project really needs. So we go ahead with the dry runs. We call them as dry runs. So we go ahead, create the pipeline firstly on the agent and run it out, see what are the errors that we get, and the errors would kind of tell you what kind of a dependency is really looking for and what is not available, and depending upon that we make a list and then install this out. And once installed, the next procedure that we do is that we try to write a PowerShell script for that, telling it, okay, fine, I want to install .NET via PowerShell script, I want to install Node via PowerShell script, or I want to install, let's say, PowerShell core via PowerShell script and all these things. So we write a huge list of, let's say, dependencies, put it inside the PowerShell script, so that every time you create an agent, I can just give you the PowerShell, you just click on the PowerShell and that will install everything out there. So this is how we try to maintain the configuration. So to answer to that, depends completely upon the project that you're working and the dependencies that are, let's say, uh, required by that particular project out there as such. Does it answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is anyone any more questions here? Okay, so just to you know give a quick recap, we've been doing, let's say, branch policies. Then we understood a couple of Git commands, like how do you work with Git and etc. And then we were doing something like a very simple build pipeline wherein we are telling, okay, fine, I want to go ahead, create a build pipeline out here, and that build pipeline was giving me the artifact, and also we put in continuous integration, and also we put in, let's say, the branch policies, and now we are having a full list of branch policies, like the number of reviewers, requirement of, let's say, linked work items, comment resolutions, the merge types limitation, and also you have something like a build validation in the form of sonar, and finally you have automatic reviewers basically who are placed inside your project and etc. Now what I want to do is that, before we started the DevOps, right, we were doing Azure PaaS services, and as a part of our Azure PaaS service lecture, there was one demo wherein we said we have a web app, and which is running, let's say, on an app service plan. And then what did we do is that we created a SQL server and then a SQL database inside it. And then we configured something known as connection strings between the SQL database and the web application. We had connection strings out here between the SQL database and the web application, so that whenever the web application kind of, let's say, starts, or whenever you click on that particular URL, it goes into the SQL, let's say, server goes into the SQL database, and then inside the SQL database, using some SQL, let's say, commands, we injected some data. We put some data into, let's say, that particular SQL database out here. It just goes ahead, does a simple query, and for you as a front end user, is going to show you all the list of courses that is offered by, let's say, this particular institution, or all the list of courses that is offered in generic out there, and this is exposed to you over the internet out here as such. So this is a demo that we did as a part of our, let's say, PaaS service class before we went into Azure DevOps. And yes, as a part of this demo, we were also trying to cover application insights because of some issues on my laptop. We couldn't do that. So we will also, let's say, go ahead and do it as a part of this lecture series. So my intention is to repeat the same thing, but I don't want to build the code using my local machine. Neither I want to create the infrastructure using my local machine and all these things. And neither I want to do the deployment using my local machine. I want to, let's say, do an end-to-end procedure with Azure DevOps. Using Azure DevOps in place, I want to, let's say, do whatever I was doing manually, and I want to release my code in the form of environments and all these things out here. So I want to implement Azure DevOps out here using this particular practice. Again, the code sample is something that you kind of get here. So if I just go into SQL, this is the coding sample that I get, and this is the code, which is the SQL app. And also, you have some commands here. If you do not remember, we were creating tables, we were inserting columns and all these things out. So I need these commands, and I also need this particular SQL, let's say, application out here as a developer to develop this. This is my expectation out here. As a developer, I need to develop all these things out, the SQL commands and all these things out here. So I want to now go ahead with the full flow of this particular project on how is it achieved from, let's say, a scratch. We'll try to talk about each and every step out there in this particular project and try to build out the same, or try to build out, let's say, a basic framework for this in this particular class, and we'll move forward with that in, let's say, in the in the coming classes out there. But before I go there, I just want to ask you all, does everyone remember this one that we did manually, that we had SQL servers, web applications and all that stuff? Anyone has any issues with this if I go with the CI/CD right now? Does everyone remember this project, or does everyone remember this one that we did? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, right. So yes, so we did this one. So what I'll come with right now is, let's come here. Let's put a couple of things, and let's look at replicating the same thing via Azure DevOps, and let's try to list down the responsibility of DevOps, a developer, a QA, and let's try to put everything together out here as such. So as a DevOps engineer, now I am the enabler of this particular project. I need to enable the developer to go ahead and store their code in the repository and etc. So as a DevOps engineer, my responsibilities are creating the Azure repos. Then next, once I create the repository, creating and protecting the develop branch using various policies out here like merge types limit, work item, let's say requirement and all these things out. And then once this is done, also creation of a continuous integration pipeline, and then creation of a continuous deployment pipeline, and very importantly, creation and maintenance of the infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I mean all these components out here, the app service plan, the SQL servers and all these things out here, etc. I need to create and maintain all these things out here. So let's go ahead and let's do one thing. Let's go into our project, let's go into our project out here that we were working on, and let's start by creating the repository. The very first thing that I'll do is that I will start creating work items for me. So I'll say new item, I'll say create repository. This is something that my Scrum Master would do for me. Telling that create repository called, let's say, SQL application, create branches and protect them. So if I now go into this particular item here, this Scrum Master will go and assign this item to me, possibly add some descriptions like, let's say, create repo, add develop branch, implement policies of the develop branch, and etc. Policies on the develop branch. Now, these are, let's say, my target for the initial days of this particular sprint. So this is my target to go ahead and do that. So I, as a DevOps engineer, come here and I say, okay, fine, I need to create a repository with a name called SQL. So let me do that. I come here, go into files, create a new repository out here, and with the name called something like SQL Web App or something like that, or whatever the name that they have asked me to provide with. And I go ahead and create the repository. And again, this is the role of a DevOps engineer out here. We are still working in the role of a DevOps engineer. After that, I, as a DevOps engineer, I say, okay, fine, you know what? This is the main branch again, which acts as a backup. So I'll create a new branch out here. I'll say develop. And while I'm creating this out, I will link the work item, which is telling create repositories and branches and etc. Telling, okay, fine, I'm creating a branch because my Scrum Master has asked to do that. I'll say create this out. And I'll change the develop to be the default branch. So let me go ahead and set this as default. Go into more options, say branch policies. I'll scroll down. I'll say required minimum number of reviewers. I'll say one. And I'll just for now, for the demo, I'll say allow requesters to approve their own change. In reality, I won't do this. I'll say check for link work items required, comment resolutions required. Imagining the project is too big, I only want the developer to do a squash merge, no basic, nothing. Only a squash merge is allowed. There is no basic. I want to maintain a very clean history. I want to maintain a very clean, super clean history out here. So I'll say squash merge. Optionally, you can go ahead add the sonar. In this demo, I am removing sonar out here because every time I do a pull request, which I will have to do a lot, the sonar will trigger and it'll take like about 2 minutes of time out there. But I would suggest you all while practicing this, please add a build validation out here. And then I'll say add automatic reviewers. And I'll look for that particular PR approver group wherein I am a part of. And I'll say save. So now my initial task of creating a branch and protecting, adding the policies and etc. This is done, which will not take a lot of time. So this is now done. So what I'll do is I'll come back to my board, and this was the task. I'll move it from, let's say, a to do to doing and done. So this is, I'm telling, okay, fine, I'm done with this. So that my Scrum Master can have a visibility thing that, okay, fine, yes, there are about this branch and etc. They created up, or this branch is there and there is something like this. And I can go ahead and put a description telling the above stands done. And I'll save and close this out. So I can move my work items so that the Scrum Master of your team or the manager of your team is it knows what you're doing or has a visibility of what you're really doing out here and etc. So this is done. So this is what I did till here. Create the repository and all these things. We'll come back, of course, to the CI pipeline and all these things out. But as a developer, my duty right now is that now I have my repository, I have my branches and etc. As a developer, I need to create a code, check the code locally, and also push the code. And along with the code, I also need to create the SQL files for the code. The reason I'm talking about SQL files out here is because this project needs you to go ahead and, let's say, inject the SQL commands into the database out here. So I need these three things as a developer. So since I am not a developer and I do not expect you all to become a developers, what we do is that in order to replicate the developer, just go to this particular project and just download this entire file out. Again, I'll just send the link across here. If you do not have the link, you can go ahead send this out here, paste it in this particular chat. Just do a click here and just download this as a zip, and this entire SQL zip file is now loaded. And this is what I needed. So let me come on to the project. So now I'm a developer. What I'll do is that I'll say, okay, fine. The repository is created, develop branch is there. Let me clone this out in my VS Code. So I'm a developer, I'm cloning this into my VS Code, etc. I'll say open this out and let me go ahead put this out in one of my folders. Let's see, where is that? Okay. So I'm now cloning that entire, let's say, project inside one of my folders on my, let's say, in my local machine. And I am now working on the develop branch of this particular project. It's on the develop branch that I'm, let's say, working on. Again, since the develop branch has, let's say, policies, I cannot directly do a commit. I should not directly do a commit. Even if I directly do try to do a commit, it'll still throw me an error. So as a developer, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, fine, create a new branch from, I'll create my own feature branch. I'll say developer one, code push. And also when I'm now creating a feature branch, the best practice is put your name. Even for a DevOps engineer, it's still, let's say, the same thing. When you're creating a feature branch, just put your name, hyphen what you're working on, hyphen the work item number that you're working on, meaning whatever is there in your board. Let's say my work item number is 17791, something like this. I'll say this is the item number, I'll say enter, and I will base this out of the develop branch. So now I'm working on this particular, let's say, feature branch. Sorry, I'm working on this particular feature branch out here, wherein it has just the README file. And as a developer, I just went ahead, I downloaded all my code here, or as a developer, I wouldn't download, but I would just say go ahead and let's say give or let's say or create all my code as such. So I'll just go ahead, I'll extract this one into a folder called SQL application, and once extracted, I'll simply go ahead copy this entire folder. So here I have my entire code. I'll simply copy this entire folder. I just go back into that particular junk folder where I was, let's say, cloning all my repository in. Let's see, let's just state modified. Let's see, yes, SQL web app, and inside which I'll just go ahead place my code. SQL app, and the code is now there, ready to be committed. There are so many changes inside, let's say, this particular repository that I need to, let's say, work on, or I worked on. So this is the code. So as a developer, I went ahead and added the code. I still need to push this, and also a SQL file. Now what we were doing in our demos is that if I just go back into my, again, my repository out here, in our demo, for our understanding, we were just copying and pasting these commands. We just went ahead, copied, paste these commands, and etc. What I'll do right now is that I'll create a full length SQL file out here. So I'll just go back into my repository. I'll create a new folder in my repository called SQL file, and inside this, let me go ahead and add a file called commands.sql. Now adding an SQL file so that I will have the end-to-end pipeline flow out here. And what I'll do is very simple. Just copy all these commands without giving one to one all that stuff. Just copy this. So creating the table. After that, just copy these three lines. If you want additional, let's say, lines out here, you can also do that. Copy all these things out. Select the stars, the select star statement so that you know that the data has been injected. And finally, there is a drop statement out here. Just copy this. I'll tell you why you need this. Just go to the very top and then place this out here. So what does this do is that firstly it checks whether the table exists and then it drops it out and then recreates the table out here. So before you go ahead and make any change to a table, we first delete the table and recreate it back again. That's how, let's say, the changes happen on a SQL command out here. So that's the reason I am just taking all these commands, placing it inside my SQL file, and let me go ahead eliminate the white spaces. There are a lot of things out here. Just put this one, and yes, this is now my SQL commands. I have all my SQL commands placed. I'll say save, and I have directly saved it onto my branch. All these changes are now ready for commit. So I'll go into the source control. I'll say, okay, fine. These are all the changes that are ready to be committed. And I'll say, okay, fine. Code and SQL file push. Stage everything. And all the changes are now staged. I'll say commit. And then I'll publish my branch. So this is me as a developer who's completing his responsibility, wherein I created the code, did a very simple test of my code on my local machine, and then also went ahead, created a SQL file, added everything out here, and now I pushed my branch out here. So if I come back into my project, into my repository, I now a branch which is called feature developer code push and etc. That is ready to be, let's say, merged into the develop branch of my, let's say, or into the develop branch, which is my, let's say, branch that I'm, let's say, really working on out here as such. Yes, any questions still here that I can take? Anyone, any questions? Anything that you're not following? Anything that you missed out here? Anyone, any questions before I move forward? Are we good, guys? Can I move forward? Yes,
Yes,
any
sir.
questions? Anyone
Yes, sir.
who's not following? Okay,
Hi, Kiran.
Yes, Kiran. Yeah.
good. Yes, someone has a question?
Yeah.
Good, sure.
Here, is there any process to upload the my code from local to future branch?
Is there any process to upload the code from local to
Ah,
feature branch? As in, like, directly on the Azure DevOps portal without having VS Code?
yeah.
Yes. So,
We created
the,
main branch in that created folders.
yeah, we created a folder. Reason being, see, if it's in a folder structure, it'll become easy for you while you're creating a pipeline. Uh, so, normally we maintain it in the form of a folder out here. But if you want to directly upload it, I do not recommend doing that. But yes, if you say more actions, you say upload files, you can directly upload all the files out here. Whatever files that you want, you can directly upload it out here as such. All right, any more questions, guys?
We cannot create the folders in DevOps in
We
this
can
portal.
create the
I mean,
folders. Yeah, we can create the folders. For example, you're trying to create a folder out here. Let's say I'm trying to create a dummy folder. I'll say new folder. And when you're creating a folder, it will also ask you for a file name. Again, folders cannot be empty. So I'll say file.txt. So when we create a folder, right, we normally make sure that we just create an empty file out here and then initiate the folder as such. But yes, if you just click on these three dots out here, let me come back here. Okay, so you stay in, comment this out. Yes, if you come back here, if you click on this, you can say new file folder and all these things, or upload folder, download and all these things out here.
so what's the difference between VS Code and here? I can directly do here and itself, right?
That's right, you can do it here. But what if you want to create 1,000 folders out here? It's
Okay.
not that easy for you to, let's say, go ahead and start playing around with the Git repository directly on Azure DevOps. Because when in reality, you'll not be, let's say, just going and putting the files out here. You'll be you want to develop files. You want to understand this. Again, this is a native tool. Unlike VS Code, if you do an error, right, it won't tell you that there's an error. So it'll become very difficult for you to track all your things out there as such. Reason being, we recommend coming from the local and pushing all these things via Git commands and all that stuff out there. Yes. Any more questions? So yes. So I have all my files. I'll create a pull request right now, and I'm now creating a pull request from feature develop or from feature, let's say this particular developer name and all that stuff, to this particular develop branch of my repository. Again, this is something that I am doing as a developer. DevOps engineers are no way involved in creation of pull requests and all these things. We have enabled this already. We said, okay, fine. We created a repository, created a branches. Let us know once the code is there inside the branch. We will go ahead and start creating a build pipeline for you, is what I am telling to my, let's say, developer. So according to which the developer is now going in, saying that, okay, fine, code push, something like this. And I'll say also very importantly, branch has policies. So I'll go ahead, create, let's say, or take an existing work item or create a new work item, I mean, take the existing work item, or let's say create the relevant work item and then attach this out here. So I'm attaching my work item and then I'm going in and saying create this out. And I, as a developer, I'll say, okay, fine. Let's say, I have created the pull request. Let me set this to autocomplete. Whenever the approver comes here, approves this out, the changes should be autocomplete out here. I'll say set to autocomplete. I'll say delete the branch after the merge is done. I don't want the branch at all. And also, I cannot go ahead and let's say select, let's say merge, fast forward, rebase, and all these things, because by the policy, I'm only allowed to do a squash commit. So I'll say, okay, fine, set to autocomplete. Fine, that's good. And as and when you do that, this entire peer approval group, right? Whoever is a part of this particular peer approval group, they're going to get emails telling that, you know what, you have a pull request ready for your approval. Do you want to go ahead and check that out? So I would come here as a lead of the development team. I would say, okay, fine. It looks like there's a pull request out here that is waiting for my, let's say, review. And I would say, okay, fine. Let me go ahead, review this out. And also in between me reviewing this out, I would also a sonar. I mean, I would also have a sonar out here, which will go ahead, do a complete code analysis, understand what are the changes out there. If yes, give me a report of that, and if no, it will fail, and the pull request will fail too much. And also, if there are any comments, even that is blocked. And I'll check all these things. I'll say, okay, fine, great. Our SQL files, everything in place. I'm good with that. And once I'm good with this, I'll say approve this out here. And as and when the lead approves, or as and when the group approves, your merge is done and the branch is deleted. Now if I look at, let's say, this branches, I should only have my develop branch, no feature branch out here. And once I come here, I would also, let's say, look at this also. If you just go into the email just to cross verify the same thing, uh, it's now waiting for that particular PR. So emails, it will take some time. It will, let's say, go ahead and take some time to come in from the time the